I stepped into the greenhouse. The moment I did, I was too shocked to speak. What was inside wasn't a farm. A small table, pipe chairs, and a few cases of beer bottles were laid out, with a mattress spread over them. A large industrial fan was running, but the temperature inside the greenhouse was clearly hotter than outside. In that hot space, my mother-in-law was listening to the radio. Her cheeks were flushed, and she didn't seem to notice that I had entered. I ran over to her. "Fiona." At my call, she finally noticed me and turned her face towards me with a smile. But she couldn't speak, only moving her mouth without sound. This was bad. I took her out of the greenhouse. Sitting her in the garage, I ran to the nearby vending machine. I just needed to get her something to drink. I rushed back to her with a cold sports drink. She drank it eagerly, like a child gulping down juice. Watching her, I couldn't help but cry. Once she looked a bit better, I spoke up. "I can't stand this anymore. Please come to our house right now. I'll go get the car." Just as I was about to leave to fetch the car, she grabbed my shirt and said something. "Fiona?" Looking into her eyes, I asked what it was. In a small voice, she said, "I appreciate it, but it's impossible. We're practically strangers now." Her face was expressionless, as if she had given up on everything. "What do you mean?" It was a day of gentle, quiet rain. My husband, Matt, and I were talking with our heads close together.
"Maybe we should take turns checking on her, like Quinn suggested."
He sighed deeply. We were talking about Fiona, my mother-in-law. Matt's elder brother Ian, his wife Helena, and their child Scout lived with her at his family home. Last time we visited with travel souvenirs. "Bring the tea quickly." Helena called out to Fiona in the kitchen, sounding haughty. I wondered why she sounded so high and mighty. As I stood up to check.
"Oh, don't worry about it. It's always like this."
Ian stopped me. I exchanged glances with Matt, who then stood up.
"Hey, Matt. I said don't worry about it."
Ian shouted in a threatening tone, completely different from how he spoke to me. Matt, unable to defy his brother, sat back down. While all this was happening, Fiona brought the tea and slowly placed it in front of us. Watching this, Ian muttered,
"You're so slow. Can't you move any faster?"
I wasn't the only one who heard it. Scout, fiddling with a smartphone nearby, smirked. "If you're done, go back to your room quickly," Helena coldly told Fiona as she brought some snacks from the kitchen. Immediately, I said loudly, "I came to see Fiona. Let's have tea and snacks together." Helena sighed dramatically. After a moment's thought, "I'm fine. Quinn, Matt, please take your time," she said before heading to her room, looking lonely. Why were they treating her so harshly? At first, I didn't understand, but as days passed, I arrived at a possibility. Maybe she was being mistreated. I hoped I was overthinking it, but something felt off. So, I shared my thoughts with Matt, and we were having this discussion.
"I wish River were here."
River is our son. This spring, he adjusted to working life in his second year as a professional and moved out. He's a grandma's boy. If River were here, he wouldn't overlook this situation. But he was busy with work and rarely visited us. But we shouldn't worry River. Let's handle this ourselves.
You're right.
We agreed to take turns visiting Fiona every weekend. The next weekend, I stood in front of the house where Fiona and the others lived. I stared at the nameplate that read Castillo. Although Fiona and I aren't blood related, she's precious family. Matt is the second son, but I've tried to act in a way that honors being a part of the Castillo family. And yet, though I didn't have concrete proof Fiona was being mistreated, I clenched my fists unconsciously. As I was about to press the intercom, I heard a voice from behind. "Oh, Quinn?" I turned to see Fiona standing there, holding grocery bags in both hands. A lot of them. I quickly took the bags from her. "Oh, thank you." She welcomed me warmly into the house. "Fiona." I hesitated, recalling the previous visit, worried she might end up serving tea again. Noticing my hesitation, she smiled and said, "It's fine. Everyone's out today." I placed the bags on the table and casually asked about the large amount of groceries. Apparently, Ian and Helena had asked her to shop, but it was far too much for a 70-year-old woman to carry. Sometimes, Helena forgets my meals. She took some ready-made meals to her room. Forgetting meals? That's impossible. When she returned, I pressed her for answers. I'm used to it. It's more comfortable eating alone in my room. She gave a lonely smile. I thought about taking her back with me, but we live in the neighboring prefecture. I couldn't disregard her feelings, having lived here all her life, and I couldn't make such a decision on my own. I decided to ask Matt to come next week and talk to Fiona together. As I thought about this, evening began to fall. Well, I need to start preparing dinner. I'll get scolded if it's not ready by the time they get back. I understood she was indirectly asking me to leave. Sorry. I apologized for not being able to help and for taking up her time, then headed home. When I got home, I reported today's events to Matt.
We can't jump to conclusions about Ian and Helena's behavior based only on Mom's words.
I was disappointed by his ambiguous response, but it was true that I hadn't seen Ian and Helena's behavior today. Matt was scheduled to visit next weekend, and I decided to accompany him. I'll go with you next week. If they mistreat her even a little, I want to bring Fiona here. I looked at Matt intently.
All right. If you think so, we'll talk to Ian on the spot.
Conceding to my pressure, Matt quickly finished his meal and started watching TV in the living room. He knew that saying anything unnecessary would lead to trouble for himself. Honestly, you're only sensitive about things like this. I muttered as I watched his back while he watched the baseball game. The next weekend came. I planned to go with Matt to see Fiona, but a problem arose at work. I was stuck dealing with it, so I ended up leaving it to Matt alone. Make sure you handle this properly. Before leaving for work on my day off, I urged Matt, but I still felt uneasy. Would it be okay? I'm really sorry for making you work on your day off. I can handle the rest alone. Noticing my restlessness, the colleague who caused the trouble spoke up. It was past 3 p.m. Going home now would only make me more anxious. I'm sorry for making you worry. Let's finish up together. I wanted to focus on work now. Relieved, my colleague bowed her head. After finishing the task together, I returned home to find Matt waiting with dinner prepared. "How did it go?" I asked as soon as I saw Matt.
Let's talk over dinner.
He began heating up the soup. According to him, Ian and Helena were home today. My mother-in-law was initially talking with us, but then my brother-in-law suddenly shouted at her.
How long are you planning to stay? Get back to your room already.
My husband was shocked, but my mother-in-law obediently followed his orders. You can't just shout at someone for no reason. My husband looked uneasy. Since childhood, my brother-in-law had been hot-tempered, and my husband seemed unable to stand up to him. But this was too much. I'll go talk to him next week. As I stood up, unable to contain myself, my husband said something unbelievable.
Next week isn't good for me.
It was my turn to go next week, so I didn't need my husband to accompany me. I'll go alone. If my husband couldn't confront his brother, I would talk to him directly. Even my brother-in-law would have some reservations with me. But my husband was indecisive.
I'm not feeling well either. Please, don't rush in alone.
This was the first I heard of him feeling unwell. I stared into his eyes, but he quickly looked away.
Let's wait until my health improves and I can arrange things.
He mumbled and quickly finished his meal before heading to the bath. What was going on? His own mother was being mistreated. But there might be complexities in the sibling or parent-child relationships that I didn't understand. If I intervened rashly, it might make things worse for my mother-in-law. So, with a feeling of unease, I decided to wait until my husband's health improved. A month later, I decided to take a longer summer holiday using my paid leave. Since that day, things had been awkward between my husband and me. I called my mother-in-law several times, and she reassured me that she was fine, but I couldn't help worrying. On the first day of the holiday, I confirmed that my husband had left for work and got into my car. It should be okay if I just check from the outside. Throughout the month, I couldn't stop thinking about my mother-in-law. I decided not to meet her face to face, but to drive by her house to see how things were. With that in mind, I set off. 2 hours later, I arrived at a supermarket near my in-laws' house and decided to walk from there. The August sun was scorching, and sweat quickly covered my body. Although this rural area was cooler than the city, it was still hot. By the time I reached my in-laws' house, I was exhausted. I should have bought a drink at the supermarket. I decided to tell them I happened to be nearby and asked to be let in, worrying more about my own condition. I rang the doorbell, but there was no response. Maybe they were out? I went to check if my brother-in-law's car was in the garage at the back of the house. There was a field behind the house, so it was possible my mother-in-law or Helena were working there. The garage was empty, and my brother-in-law's car wasn't there. But something else caught my eye. Has this greenhouse always been this clean? The greenhouse next to the garage, which had been unused and tattered, seemed to have new plastic covering it. I peered inside and saw a figure. My mother-in-law or Helena must be inside. I found the entrance and stepped into the greenhouse. I was speechless at what I saw. Inside was not a field but a small table, folding chairs, crates of beer bottles, and a mattress. A large industrial fan was blowing hot air around, making it even hotter inside than outside. My mother-in-law was listening to the radio, her cheeks flushed, unaware of my presence. What an unusual sight. I rushed over to her. Fiona. She finally noticed me, smiled, but only moved her mouth without making a sound. This is bad. I led her out of the greenhouse and sat her in the garage, then ran to the nearest vending machine. My thirst didn't matter. I needed to get her something to drink. Panting, I returned with a cold sports drink and gave it to her. She gulped it down like a child drinking juice. Watching her, tears welled up in my eyes. This was abuse. As her color improved, I spoke. I can't take this anymore. She looked at me blankly. Come stay with us. I'll bring the car around. Ignoring her response, I started towards the car when she tugged at my shirt. Fiona? Bending down to her level, I asked what she wanted to say. I appreciate it, but I can't. What did she mean by can't? She continued. We're no longer family. Her expression was one of complete resignation. What do you mean? At that moment, a loud horn blared. Turning towards the sound, I saw a car with its headlights on high beam, even though it wasn't night. I helped my mother-in-law move out of the way as the car reversed aggressively into the garage. I'm sorry. I tried to apologize to my brother-in-law for being in the way, but he cut me off with a shout.
Trespassing.
I knew entering the property without permission was wrong, but this was excessive. My mother-in-law's life had been in danger. Wait a minute. I shouted back, matching his volume. I shouldn't have entered without permission, but don't call me a criminal. Helena started laughing, and Scout was playing with his phone, seemingly uninterested.
Did you hear that? She admitted it. This thief.
This was outrageous. Calling me a thief is too much. I argued back, but it was futile. My brother-in-law instructed Helena to call the police. Well, since she used to be family, if she leaves now, we can overlook it this time. I reacted to Helena's words. Used to be family? Her earlier comment about being strangers nagged at me. What do you mean? I pressed Helena for an explanation. Didn't you know? You're already divorced. I was stunned. What? Me, divorced? Was this why my husband didn't want me to visit alone? Is this why things had been awkward between us? My mind raced.
Hurry up and call the police.
His voice snapped me back to reality. There must be some explanation. I decided to trust my husband over these people and stood my ground. Call the police if you must. But first, tell me why my mother-in-law was in that greenhouse. I pointed towards the greenhouse. Helena looked at me like I was clueless. She smells like old people. It's disgusting. What? I couldn't comprehend their reason. They had banished her to the greenhouse because of her smell? This family's lack of basic decency was appalling. The brother shouting for the police, the woman treating people like objects, and the indifferent child. It was too much. You can't stay here. Come with me now. I took her hand, and pain shot through my arm. My brother-in-law had hit me.
You're just after money. Thief.
He leaned in, his sweaty, dirty face intimidating.
You won't get a penny from us.
He raised his hand to strike me, but at that moment, the sound of police sirens approached. When he saw the police car parked in front of the house, My brother-in-law suddenly became flustered.
Who called them?
This time, he turned the blame on Helena and Scout. What on earth are you doing? One police officer and my husband rushed over from the patrol car. As soon as I saw the police officer's face, I felt a wave of relief. The police officer was my son, River. He had graduated from university last year and joined the police force. I knew his first posting was near here, but I hadn't expected him to come today. River, why are you here? River raised his hand to stop me. He was on duty, so he had to maintain his professional demeanor.
We received a call from a neighbor saying there was a disturbance in the yard.
With that, River approached my brother-in-law.
Can you explain the situation?
Irritated by River's formal tone, my brother-in-law clicked his tongue.
It's nothing. Just a family argument. But why are you here? And what's with that outfit?
River's police job in the local station was news to my brother-in-law's family. River sighed lightly and explained.
We've received numerous complaints about noise from this house. So, we've been patrolling the area frequently.
My brother-in-law and Helena looked awkwardly at the ground.
I never imagined you'd relegate someone to a greenhouse.
River looked sadly at my mother-in-law. My brother-in-law seemed to realize he couldn't win against River and turned his anger towards my husband.
Did you bring them here?
Hesitant at first, my husband responded firmly.
I decided I wouldn't be at your beck and call anymore.
My husband had known I was coming today from River and had pretended to go to work while waiting nearby. When I brought my mother-in-law out of the greenhouse, he called the police. Hearing this, my brother-in-law laughed loudly.
So it's trespassing and attempted kidnapping, then?
Helena seemed to agree, smirking. My brother-in-law shoved me.
Well done for calling the police before I did. Hey, officer, arrest this woman.
My brother-in-law was pushing for my arrest, but River didn't budge. Instead, he sternly addressed my brother-in-law.
Signing a divorce paper without consent is a crime, and such a divorce is invalid. Are you aware of that?
Huh?
Scout, who had been silent until now, reacted. Scout, what does that mean? Apparently, Scout had misinformed his parents. He had told Helena that if they got my husband to sign the divorce papers, she could sign my part, and it would be legal.
I've already contacted a lawyer.
To my brother-in-law's dumbfounded family, River added.
Also, you put an elderly person in serious danger. We will be taking her into protective custody.
River said this officially, then helped my mother-in-law back to the patrol car. My husband and I followed, leaving my brother-in-law's family standing in shock. My husband spoke cheerfully while holding a beer.
I've never been more proud of River than that day.
River, looking bashful, sat next to my smiling mother-in-law. After leaving the police station, we took my mother-in-law home, and the three of us now live happily together. Today, River visited us, and my mother-in-law prepared a feast. I was really worried about how things would turn out. After the incident, my brother-in-law faced charges for forging divorce papers and abusing my mother-in-law, which made the news. Helena and Scout disappeared to avoid the media, and we don't know where they are now. River manages their vacant house. My mother-in-law regained her health after moving in with us and started a vegetable garden. The dishes made from her homegrown vegetables are exceptional. Fiona, please teach me how to cook sometime.
I wish you had taught her while I was still living here.
We laughed together, enjoying our happy time. I do miss the days when everyone gathered. My mother-in-law reminisced about the past when my father-in-law was alive. She would cook while River and Scout played video games, and the rest of us enjoyed drinks and conversation. It was a nostalgic memory for her. No one understood why my brother-in-law's family changed, but their actions towards my mother-in-law were unforgivable. I took a swig of my beer, hoping that one day I might forgive them while savoring the precious moments with my family. How did you like today's story? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.